But I want to go ahead and I want to get started with this story coming out of East Palestine, Ohio. I had never heard of East Palestine until recently, and that is because of the train derailments that have happened there. Now, there's a lot to cover here. I have a couple of clips I want to show you, and then there's an article that goes a little bit deeper into why this happened in the first place. There has been calls from people, at least on social media, to get Pete Buttigieg to actually respond or say something. He finally has responded days later after this has happened, but I don't know what more people need to see for them to be convinced that I think that Pete is not fit to be Secretary of Transportation. Look how many incidents have happened under his leadership in this position. So I want to go ahead and get started with this clip first that does a little bit of a overview about the chemicals that were released. So if you were not aware, yes, there was a train, it derailed East Palestine, Ohio, which is actually on the border of Ohio and then like parts of Pennsylvania, I believe. And unfortunately, those trains were actually carrying liquid chemicals. And when those trains collided or derailed and exploded, it released the chemicals into the air, which means the people in that town would need to evacuate so that they don't consume the air that is tainted by those chemicals. Now, let's go ahead and start this clip, and then I'm going to get into a further discussion about this as to why I believe this happened in the first damn place. Let's go.
Details, though, about that train derailment in Ohio that covered a town in toxic chemicals.
Yeah, talk about scary. I mean, you see the pictures on TV, this train derailment aflame. We know that it was highly combustible, and there were concerns that it could be an even worse explosion than the contained explosion that they had there. But we do know that there are more concerns that there are other chemicals that were carried in those railway cars. And it's adding to a list of concerns and mistrust that residents have in East Palestine, Ohio, about returning to their homes. Is it too soon? Kelsey Kernstein is here to talk a little bit more about that. Kelsey.
Well, yes, it's too soon. Based on the comments that I've seen and the videos I've seen from people on Twitter who do live in that area, some of them felt like they rushed back too quickly. The chemicals are obviously still in the air. The chemicals have affected pets. So people have found dead animals, sick animals. It's also affected the fish, which means the chemicals have gotten into the water. I don't know about you, but I don't see fish like just jumping up out of the river and flying. That does not happen. That means the chemicals got into the water. Now, you need to understand, too, who is using that water. Is that water used by the residents as well? If that's the case, then that is also going to cause issues. So, yes, I think it was too soon to tell those residents that it was safe for them to come back in. And I want to remind you, this is not just affecting residents in East Palestine, Ohio. This has spread across, I think it was at least like a 5-mile radius. So those bordering states that surround Ohio, they are also being affected. So it's not contained, so to speak. Remember, the chemicals were released into the air. So let's get back into this clip.
Adrian and Mitch, this is a concerning new update for residents living in the East Palestine area. This morning, we are learning that more chemicals, not just vinyl chloride, were on the Norfolk train that derailed over a week ago in Ohio.
New this morning, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency sent a letter to Norfolk Southern stating these 3 other chemicals were also aboard in some of those rail cars that caught fire. We spoke to a hazardous materials specialist who says that some of these chemicals are carcinogen.
There's a lot of what ifs, and we're going to be looking at this thing 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line.
Okay, so they said carcinogen. For those who are not aware, carcinogens are cancer-causing agents. So if it has released that into the air, that means this gentleman said 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, it could end up that people there may not be affected by the chemicals until years later. Now, where have we seen this before? There was a movie called Erin Brockovich. What was that movie about? It wasn't just about Erin Brockovich's life. It was about a big case that they reported or that they discovered about the people in the town that were affected by chemicals, that were affected by the water, and it was causing people in that town to develop cancer. So even if they do evacuate the town, that doesn't mean that even 10 years, 15 years down the road, people still won't be affected by the chemicals that were released. Again, it is releasing carcinogens. So keep that in mind. Let's go back in.
And wondering, gee, cancer clusters could pop up, well water could go bad.
And this video here, News Nation acquired of dead fish in cloudy water. Residents say they've also seen sick animals, and their homes in town are still covered in debris.
You see the fish that they showed you? This is what I was talking about right here. Again, fish don't jump out of the water and fly. So the chemicals got into the water.
And this video here, News Nation acquired of dead fish in cloudy water. Residents say they've also seen sick animals, and their homes in town are still covered in debris. The EPA, Norfolk Southern, and hundreds of tests have been performed, confirming the water and air are in good living condition.
Vinyl chloride, I know that's the most common thing heard right now. That was below detectable limit.
Some tanker cars were also carrying vinyl chloride, a dangerous odorless chemical used in packaging.
Notice that they said it's an odorless chemical. So it's not like you could smell it and say, oh, wait a minute. I think we have, this chemical is present. It's odorless. So how do you even know that it's there? You don't know unless they test for it, right?
And the CDC warns that breathing in the gas over a long period of time could be connected to brain, lung, and blood cancers.
Brain, lung, and blood cancer. So you are looking at, and I'm going to go ahead and call it. For the people who were rushed back early, don't be surprised if there isn't some type of class action lawsuit years down the line. Don't be surprised.
We spoke to a renowned consumer advocate who says she doesn't believe those safe tests, and residents should be taking pictures and videos of everything they see.
After 30 years of what I've been through and what this community is going through, they know. Come on, it's vinyl chloride. It's in the air. The fish are dying. Really? Does that give you comfort that maybe I should be in this area? Probably not.
And police are now going door to door to check on residents who get their drinking water from wells in the area. And a town hall meeting is set for this Wednesday, and it is expected to be heated.
Thank you for watching.
Okay, let's talk about this for just a second because she mentioned the drinking water, which I noticed one of you, I think it was Saul, you already mentioned. What about the drinking water? Yeah, we're looking at this could be another Flint, right? Like the drinking water, that is key. So towns and cities, the way that they get their drinking water, it varies from town to town. I'll give you a quick example here in Massachusetts. There are some towns in Massachusetts that get their drinking water from wells, just like this town. So they're telling you that the water, the river there is connected to the wells. Okay, so people aren't just drinking this water. People also bathe in this water. So they're taking showers. That's why I said this could be another Flint. So keep that in mind. And then there are some people who live in like the municipalities, the more metropolitan areas where their water isn't coming from a well, it's coming from like a water tower or something like that. But the reality is this. Yeah, Sean, that's exactly what I was about to say. I wouldn't trust nothing they say. No. Even when they tell you it's okay, it's safe for you to come back now, I would not go back there. Again, this chemical is odorless. So you don't know. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you don't know necessarily if it is present. Now, what caused this derailment to happen in the first place? Reading this story, it was really interesting to me because it reminded me of our public transportation system here in Boston and some of the same mistakes that were made. Now, we didn't have chemicals released into the air, but we have had things happen where trains have caught on fire while passengers were inside the subway train. And that is due to a lack of maintenance in order to be cheap and save money. Let's get into it. The Guardian reported on this story. It says thousands in East Palestine. And yes, I don't know why it's pronounced. Someone just asked me this in the chat. Gyro, why do they pronounce it Palestine? I don't know. It's spelled like Palestine, right? Anywho, thousands in East Palestine, a town of about 5,000 people, evacuated, and officials warned the control burn would create a phosgene and hydrogen chloride plumb across the region. Phosgene is a highly toxic gas that can cause vomiting and breathing trouble. So now we're looking at the possibility of people having asthma. Now we're going back to some of these environmental problems. And was used as a weapon in the First World War. Though no one died in the accident, the catastrophe serves as a wake-up call to the potential for more deadly freight rail derailments. Public health advocates are warning. By one estimate, 25 million Americans live in an oil train blast zone. And had the derailment occurred just a few miles east, it would be burning in downtown Pittsburgh, with tens of thousands of residents in immediate danger. Ineffective oversight and a largely self-monitoring industry that has cut the nation's rail workforce to the bone in recent years, as it puts record profits over safety, is responsible for the wreck. You see this? Record profits over safety. We're going to get back to that in just a second. Now, that's coming from Ron. He is an Amtrak locomotive engineer and former Norfolk Southern freight engineer. The Palestine wreck is the tip of the iceberg and a red flag. If something is not done, then it's going to get worse, and the next derailment could be cataclysmic. About 4.5 million tons of toxic chemicals are shipped by rail each year, and an average of 12,000 rail cars carrying hazardous materials pass through cities and towns each day. Now, that's according to the U.S. Department of Transportation. The latest accident comes after 47 people killed in the town of Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, in 2013 when a runaway train exploded. In February 2020, a crude oil train derailed and exploded outside of Guernsey, Saskatchewan. And an ethyl train in Kentucky derailed and burst into flames a week later. The Pittsburgh region alone has seen 8 train derailments over the last 5 years, according to the public health advocacy group Rail Pollution Protection Pittsburgh. And about 1,700 annually occur nationally. The causes of the Pittsburgh accidents highlight the myriad ways in which things can go wrong. A crack in a track ignored by rail companies caused a 2018 derailment, while another train hit a dump truck at a crossing with inadequate safety equipment. A broken axle on a train car is thought to be the source of the East Palestine accident. So anything can cause this to happen. And I think this should be a red flag and a warning sign for the transportation department, so that you really have to continue the maintenance for these trains. Now, listen to this. The U.S. Transportation Department in 2020 approved a rule to allow liquefied natural gas, or LNG, to be shipped via rail with no additional safety regulations. That's to cut costs and to speed up the process. If you need to get something shipped rather quickly, how do you do it? You cut costs and you speed up the process. And when you do that, you can end up with something like this happening. I've seen this time and time again. Okay, we had this problem here in Boston when Governor Deval Patrick was governor of Massachusetts. Under his leadership, the trains weren't doing the maintenance test. So these trains are supposed to have maintenance tests every 5 years. Under his leadership, they skipped it. It wasn't happening. Next thing you know, towards the end of his gubernatorial administration, these trains started to catch on fire. And I'm talking like people would just hop on the red line at Harvard Square Station to go into Kenmore, and you saw people on the local news punching and kicking the doors to get off the trains because a train car caught on fire. That's due to not having those maintenance tests. Again, trying to be cheap and trying to speed up the process. So when Governor Deval Patrick, that happened under his leadership. When Governor Baker became governor, he inherited that same issue. Now, he tried to fix the trains and all this stuff, but because there was so much backlog and when it came to maintenance, there was just no way fixing this. Some of the train lines have closed completely, or some of these stops have closed completely because they're just like, these trains are not functional. You can't get on a train in the morning and not know if you're going to make it there on time, let alone if the train is going to catch on fire. This has happened multiple times, trying to shortcut things, trying to be cheap. Trains can now run 100 or more tank cars filled with 30,000 gallons of the substance, largely from shale fields to saltwater ports. The decision was opposed by local leaders, unions, and what do you know? The fire departments. That should have been a big warning sign, right? If the fire department is opposed to this, you might want to listen to the fire department. I'm just saying. And the NTSB. Now, here's the interesting part. It wasn't just the fire departments and the unions that tried to warn about this. Remember those railroad workers that were trying to go on strike? Remember those guys? Turns out they also warned about it. Now, More Perfect Union, they covered this. And you can watch the video here. This shows you, there's no audio on this video, but this shows you what happened. So you can see after the derailment, you see all of these gases going up into the air. This is all the chemicals going into the air. Look at that. Now I'm going to pause right here because a lot of times people just want to focus on the black cloud. I want you to focus on this little light gray cloud over here. You see, that's the gases starting to spread. You see? So this was very dangerous. You know, God forbid this was someone's house nearby. But this is very dangerous. Ilhanner says that's what's happening in my city now. I'm so sorry to hear that, Ilhanner. I'm so sorry to hear that. This is terrible. So you see how high this went up into the air? Okay. Dangerous chemicals and gases. Now, as I said, remember those railroad workers that came onto this show? Union rail workers with railroad workers have warned of a ticking time bomb, saying in the last 10 years, Class 1 carriers have dramatically increased both the length and tonnage of the average train while cutting back maintenance and inspection. See, here's these words again. Maintenance and inspection. How do you not inspect the trains? How do you not inspect the trains just in general? But how do you not inspect trains that are carrying dangerous chemicals? How do you let that slide? So even they tried to warn, people don't want to listen to them. Congress didn't want to listen to them. Joe Biden didn't really want to listen to them. Nobody wants to listen to them. And they tried to warn you. Let's go on. And remember last fall, let me make this bigger. There we go. And remember last fall when rail workers were about to strike, they repeatedly expressed that rail companies' system of running their lines, which they call precision scheduled railroading, was about profit maximization at the expense of worker and public safety. The expense of worker and public safety. Did they not tell us about this? When those railroad workers came onto this show, did they not tell us about the safety issues? This is all blowing up, and I'm sorry. But this is happening under Pete, who's Secretary of Transportation. This is happening under Joe Biden's administration. They didn't want to listen to the railroad workers. They didn't want to listen. And now look what you got. Look what you got. Let's go on. Even more fundamental to the union argument was and is that railroads are trying to run those complex operations with fewer and fewer workers. That was another thing that they mentioned when they came on. They've cut 22% of jobs since 2017. This approach with the wealthy owners bill as efficiency really means overworked workers. See what happens when they get greedy and they try to save money? Let's go on. Overburdened and exhausted workers means more dangerous situations for the folks making our trains run on no days off and no sick leave. And it's not because the rail companies don't have the money, because they do have the money. Okay. They really do have the money. Norfolk Southern, the company running the trains that derailed in East Palestine with toxic chemicals on board, brought in over $12 billion in revenue last year. This is capitalism at its finest. You have the money, you probably have more than what you actually need, and you choose to exploit the workers anyway. This is what happened when greed gets into the way. This is one of the arguments for nationalizing the railroad system. This is one of the arguments. Let's go on. I believe there's one more. Norfolk also announced a $10 billion stock buyback program last year. This was new. So they're not saying that they can't say they didn't have the money. And all this money for stock buybacks that line the pockets of rich investors is money that's not being used to improve safety and make the upgrades that unions have been pushing for. It's also money that's not going to exhausted workers. You see what I mean? It's all about making rich investors more rich. That's what this is about. So let's lay off workers. Let's make the ones who are left work overtime and not pay them for the overtime. Oh, and let's not give them paid sick days. Greed. Didn't mean to do that. Not only are rail profits not helping workers, they're instead being used to lobby against regulation. Now, David Sirota reported about this. The Lever found that rail companies spent big to block stricter safety rules, specifically for trains with hazardous materials like the one in Ohio. Look at that cloud. Now, it doesn't end there because there's more. Because it wasn't just Ohio. Just the other day, Texas had a train derail in the Houston area. Now, I do want to say it's not unusual for a train to derail. I want you to understand this is not something that has never happened before. But the problem is that obviously they have taken shortcuts when it comes to maintenance and when it comes to inspections, and that has led to this. So in Houston, officials report that the train was carrying hazardous materials, prompting Union Pacific to monitor air quality at the site of the crash, according to the Splendora Police Department. So this is Houston. And I don't think they have audio on this one, but you can see the train derailed here. And this was breaking news. So what do you do, guys? What if there were homes right here? You know, when I lived in my first apartment, my real first apartment, there was a train track like right behind our apartment building. It was kind of annoying because every 3 o'clock in the morning on the dot, you'd hear that train go by. And it was this type of train. It wasn't like the Amtrak trains that carry passengers. It was freight trains. So imagine if that happened as close as that track was to our apartment building. If that happened, we could have been affected. We could have been hit. But that's Houston, Texas. Again, they don't have sound on this video. I don't know why, but they don't. Now, of course, in the midst of all of this, people were looking towards Pete and saying, where is Pete? And I went on Twitter yesterday morning and I went down his timeline and say, let's see if Pete has talked about this. Nothing about it. Not one thing about it. But he has now responded. Let's hear what Pete has to say. From day one, our U.S. DOT personnel have been assisting in the response to Norfolk Southern derailment in Ohio. As NTSB conducts its investigation and EPA works to keep residents safe, our federal rail and pipeline and hazardous material teams will continue to offer support.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
Oh, hold on. Oh, that was weird. I think that thing just played. Let me pause that. Sorry. That came out of nowhere. Anywho, where did that go? Where did Pete go? Okay, here we go. All right. So, of course, people have memes and everything. But the thing is, like, no, guys, this response was today at 12:51 p.m. This happened days ago. Days ago. And I believe I tweeted. Did I come on here and tweet something? Let me see if I can find. I don't think I can get out of here. Well, let me do it. Let me go to, I think I said something about this. I'm pretty sure I did. I did. Okay. This is what I said, because he tweeted this as well. So he has two Twitter accounts. So he said, I continue to be concerned about the impacts of the February 3rd train derailment near East Palestine, Ohio. So again, February 3rd. That's what I was telling you guys. This was days ago. Right, Danny? Right. Okay. And Pete was silent. And the effects on families in 10 days since their lives were upended through no fault of their own. It's important that families have access to useful and accurate information. So I was like, bruh, where have you been? It's been days since the train derailed and you wanted to be president? Like, this is something I want you guys to really think about. Pete Buttigieg ran for president in 2020. He ran for president. Could you imagine? It's just, I'm sorry, but this was super late, man. Super late. And so he tweeted that. Like I said, he has two Twitter accounts, one that says secretary, one that says Pete. And then he went on to say, U.S. DOT has been supporting the investigation led by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB. Our Federal Rail Administration and pipelines and hazardous materials teams were on site within hours of the initial incident and continue to be actively engaged. We will look to these investigation results and based on them, use all relevant authorities to ensure accountability and continue to support safety. But the trains weren't safe to begin with, which is what the railroad workers were trying to tell you. In the meantime, our federal partners at EPA are on site and monitoring indoor and outdoor air quality to test for VOCs and other chemicals of concern. EPA has screened 291 homes and no detections were identified and 181 homes remain. To request screening, call Stop right now. Thank you very much. Stop it. Why do the residents need to call? You should already have EPA there scheduled to go through every home. Why do they need to pick up the Let's think about this, guys. You're asking the people who were just evacuated, then some of them told it's safe to come back. Now you're asking them, these people trying to figure out if they're going to be able to go to work, because of the conditions? Keep that in mind. So this means some of them may not get paid. They're trying to figure out, are the kids going to school? And the teacher's trying to figure out if they're going to be going to school to teach these kids, right? So keep this in mind, all the things they're trying to figure out. Am I going to have to leave my home for good? Am I going to have to sell my home? Is it ever going to be safe for me to come back to my house? Do I still have a job? See, Pete doesn't have to worry about that. And in all of that, Pete wants them to pick up the phone Sorry, guys. Told you I have a cold. Pete wants them to pick up the phone and call to request a screening. They shouldn't have to call to request a screening. You should just screen all the homes. I don't know what to say. Like, I just... Here's the link that he put for the site. And why? First of all, everyone is not on Twitter. Newsflash, Pete, not everyone in East Palestine, Ohio is on Twitter. So I don't know what you want them to do about this. And then two, the fact that you're expecting them to make a phone call when the EPA should just do it regardless, it's asking for too much. This tweet went out. Go here so you can get the date. February 13th, yesterday at 8:24 p.m. This train derailed days ago. It took him this long to even respond. And I want to show you what this gentleman said here, because this is, oh boy, this is actually very dangerous to say any of the area surrounding the massive chemical release is safe. 1 ppm exposure over an 8-hour period is the maximum threshold one can take. You need better advisors. I'm disgusted. This a blue check? Oh, damn. He's an attorney and he's a vet. Like, I don't know what else to say, you guys, but this is appalling. How many more incidents need to happen before Pete is removed from being Secretary of Transportation? How many more incidents? First the airlines, then the trains. What else?